Welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer Chris Carter. That's Nick Wright. Hey, guys.
Good night, Jenna. How are you?
I'm good.
We got to all hang out together last night.
It was fun.
Not watching sports.
I like socializing with you.
We haven't
guys.
done outside of work in quite some time. Hang out when there was not sporting involved.
Instead, there was a wet carpet.
Fox up front's involved. CC was very popular amongst the celebrity crowd, which is good to see.
It was a good night.
Yeah, it was fun.
Good night.
It was absolutely
great game last night.
Great game. A lot of fun last night.
We had a good time. I actually was able to streamline right into the game from being social with you guys. So I got to do the best of everything. Watch sports and hang out and tell fun jokes with you, Nick. It was
Jenna's off-air humor, if you can believe this, almost as good as her on-air humor. I'll let the audience figure out what that means exactly.
No, they know. Just like that, the Houston Rockets' home court advantage went poof.
Just like that.
Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals last night, Rockets and Warriors. We wanted a good fight. We got a good fight until the Rockets stopped fighting. James Harden was awesome on offense, scoring 41 points, but the Warriors were more awesome on offense. They beat the Rockets 119 to 106. So Kevin Durant was the difference in this game, 37 points and what felt like 200 mid-range buckets. How good was KD? Here's his head coach, Steve Kerr.
Kevin is the ultimate luxury because a play can break down and you just throw him the ball and he can get you a bucket as well as anybody on earth. So Kevin, you know, this is why this is why anybody would want him on their team. But you think about a couple of years ago and we're in the finals and we couldn't quite get over the hump. You know, Kevin's the guy who puts you over the hump and I don't know what you do to guard him. He can get any shot he wants.
I mean, I don't know if we're at our peak. I think we could be better. I mean, the stakes are high. I mean, we playing the Western Conference Finals against the best team in the league, number 1 seed, and MVP on their team. So, I mean, I think everybody just wants to enjoy this time hooping. Not a lot of people get this opportunity, so we want to take advantage of it. You can tell everybody is just very excited to be here.
So I think everyone thought this was going to go one of two ways. Either the Warriors were going to be the Warriors that we knew they could be and just absolutely dominate, or the Rockets were just going to come out, take advantage of being at home, and do the same thing. And it turned out it was the Warriors. Cece, how do you think they were able to just absolutely own the Rockets last night?
Well, it was a very entertaining game. I wouldn't go as far as to say that they owned the Rockets last night, but this was what Golden State can do. They come at you in waves. You could see even when Houston scored, you didn't have time to celebrate, because Golden State pushes it back down to the other end, and they will take a shot within the first 5 seconds on the shot clock. But what I thought was the difference in the game was Golden State's ability to be an elite defensive team. We never give them credit because they have all the names, they have all the shooters, all the scorers, they have Draymond as a personality, Steve Kerr as a coach, which we never give any type of credit to. But defensively, to me, they're the best defense in the league. And the reason why is because not only because the threat they put on you offensively, but they can, because of their overall length, they can shut you down. We saw within the first 18 minutes of the game, 3 times Houston shot clock violations, and many other times where they were pressed against the clock to try to get a good shot.
To your point there, CC, 19 times the Rockets got their shot off in the final 5 seconds of the shot clock. I know you had brought up before the show about the shot clock violations, so I dug into it a little more.
Yes.
3 actual violations, another 19 possessions where you're up against the shot
Right,
clock.
so we talk about a Houston offense, one of the most efficient in NBA history, now rushing to try to run their offense. I thought they became too one-dimensional with the high pick and roll, with letting Harden being the dominant ball handler. I thought they were easier to defend compared to moving the ball, which we had seen them do since they had added Chris Paul to the lineup. But ultimately, Kevin Durant picked up right where he was last year at the NBA Finals, where he was the MVP. He let people know the reason why. And he talked about it in his interview afterward. Kevin Durant is not about the drama. He's about hooping. And this Golden State team, for the first time going on the road to start a series, you could see that their focus was there. But there is no answer for Kevin Durant in the NBA. Like the coach said, Steve Kerr, he said, as far as offensive player, you want a guy who can get you a bucket better than anyone on the planet, it's Kevin Durant. And that's what we saw last night, and that's the reason, the difference between Golden State and the Houston Rockets.
And when Kevin Durant is only asked to get you buckets, I don't know what you're supposed to do. Through 3 quarters, Kevin Durant had this stat line: 30 points, 1 rebound, 0 assists. KD was very good defensively. He was part of the entire Warrior crew.
Yeah, and the reason why he didn't get a lot of rebounds was because he was playing on the perimeter, and there wasn't a lot of long rebounds, compared to what he normally gets, 7 to 9 rebounds a game.
Right, but the Warriors have the ultimate luxury, which is they can ask one of the all-time great shot makers in NBA history, a guy who we talked about the interview we did with Bill Simmons, where he said, he talked about him versus LeBron. He said, LeBron spends a lot of time working on his body. I spend time working on my game. I want to be able to make every shot on the court. And if you look at his shot chart last night, that's what he did. Every quadrant of the court he scored from. Close middle, medium middle, far middle. Everywhere on the court he scored from. And when you have talent around him that denies your ability to send a double team at him, you just have to hope he misses. Like, there is no answer for it. If you could double him, you could still get the shot over the double team, but at least you would have a better chance. You can't double anyone on Golden State. And so when you add to that, Trevor Ariza, who was the defender who had the most success on him, got in early foul trouble, and then Andre Iguodala did something brilliant when they left Ariza in with 4. The next time down the court, went right at him, so Ariza picked up his 5th. Then all of a sudden, the Rockets are just hoping KD misses. And then you add to that Cece's point, which is not only this great team defense, but the guy that I believe over the last 4 years has been the single best defender in the NBA, Draymond Green, who was not worried about anything but defense. You have a team that steals home court advantage from a great basketball team, and a team that drastically changes how anyone who picked the Rockets, myself included, feels about this series.
Talking about Kevin Durant, he's a 7-footer who has the ball handling skills of a point guard and the mid-range jumper, which you saw a million of last night, of a shooting guard, and then goes out in the press conference and says, oh, we haven't reached our peak yet. We still have so much more to do. Did you feel that way watching this game last night? Did you feel that there was another level that they could take this game to last night?
I mean, that's just a common answer. I mean, because the game was highly contested. They weren't lights out. Steph didn't play great. I mean, if you look at it, one of the reasons why Houston couldn't win was they couldn't force the ball out of the big three's hand. They took 75% of the shots. Clay, KD, and Steph, 75% of the shots. If you give the Warriors, those three, 75% of the Warriors shots, they're going to beat you. Unless they just have a complete, totally off night.
That's the most big three have taken in any game all year, to Cece's point. That's the highest percentage of any shots the big three have taken for the Warriors in a single game all year.
Yeah, so if you don't do that, if you don't find another way for the other to force the ball in the other player's hands, it's going to be difficult. But you can't forget, this is a Warriors team that has been amazing in the 4. This is the last year in a 4-year stretch that they have been amazing. This didn't start last night, but their focus going on the road against a 65-win team, you could see why they've won these championships. Draymond, Iggy, they bring in the center to start the game. Mooney was a huge substitution, bringing him in. So in the pick and roll, he's far more athletic, something you had talked about yesterday, utilizing him. It was an exciting game to watch because this is the best the NBA has to offer. And to me, this is the NBA Finals.
Well, and this is right now this Warriors team, if they continue this going after what they did last year, a team that is now 25-3 in the playoffs since they added Kevin Durant. You're going to talk about them not just as the best the NBA has to offer this year, but ever. This is a Warriors team that has never lost. The Warriors 2.0, the Warriors with Kevin Durant, they have never lost a game 1 in a playoff series. They have never lost a game 2 in a playoff series. They have never been forced to more than 5 games in a playoff series. This was a critical opportunity for Houston. At halftime, you thought, okay, they got a shot. And that Warriors third quarter wave, they ended up having a 13-point lead with a few minutes left in the third quarter. Houston cut into it a little bit. They weren't able to do enough. And that's with Harden scoring 40-plus, and with Steph Curry having the fewest points he's ever scored in a conference finals game. That's all bad news for Houston.
We will talk about this from Houston's point of view coming up. But on the other side, is Game 2 a must-win now for LeBron and the Cavs? We'll break down the Eastern Conference Finals. That's next. This is the First Things First podcast, the episode brought to you by forhims.com. It's time to discuss an issue that you may not want to hear. 66% of men lose their hair by age 35. But good news, it's easier to keep the hair you have than to replace what you lost. How will you feel a year from now if there are bald spots creeping up? Well, here are your options. Do you want a bald spot to pop up or your hairline to recede, or do you want to do something about it first? This is where forhims.com comes in. It is a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and an overall helpful product for men. That's right, thanks to science, baldness can be optional. Hims connects you with real doctors and medical-grade solutions to treat hair loss. There are no waiting rooms or weird doctor visits down a back alley. Just go to forhims.com and take action today. It is so easy. Products will be brought right to your door. Here's how to do it. Order now. Listeners get a trial month of Hims for just $5 today, right now, while supplies last. See website for full details. This would cost hundreds if you went to the doctor or a pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/first. That's forhims, forhims.com/first, forhims.com/first. As far as the Cavs are concerned, second verse better not be same as the first. Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals did not go according to plan for LeBron. Scored just 15 points, turned the ball over 7 times, and had 0 answers for the Boston Celtics. But teammate Tristan Thompson isn't doubting the King will show up tonight.
I mean, usually when LeBron has these kind of games, the next game he does something legendary. But at the same time, we can't rely on that. We got our job to do as other players. We got to be able to help him and be effective. The more effective we are, the more it opens up for him. And Boston does do a good job, clogging the paint. So if our shooters got to make shots, if our bigs got to get offensive rebounds and finish around the rim to open stuff up, that's what we got to do.
All right, CC, do you agree with Tristan Thompson there? What do you expect from LeBron and the Cavs in Game 2 tonight?
I wouldn't like to rely on that. I mean, even though the Cavs have. I mean, the Cavs, let's just face it, the Cavs are not a great team, all right? They are a bunch of guys and LeBron James. LeBron James is one of the legendary players, but that's all. The rest of these players, no. So they're coming to the gym, yes, relying on LeBron to have some legendary performance. But for me, if I was on the team, I would really be trying to concentrate to make the kind of contribution that would get them a victory. This game scares me, and the reason why is because I believe Boston's a better team than Cleveland. And you can't rely on LeBron James for everything, in every situation. Tristan's there, oh, yeah, in situations like this, typically he turns into Superman. Well, what if he doesn't? They'll lose. Yeah,
Game one is what happens if they don't.
I mean, because if he's not Superman, they're going to lose. For me, I just don't like the overall dependence upon LeBron. There's no way that George Hill plays worse. So they have some. I'm gonna take Nick Wright's theory from the Pacers series. Oh man, there's no way they can play worse. Well, I do believe with Boston's defense, they can force Cleveland and their lack of offense to playing bad. So this is a game that I'm more concerned than I had in game number 1.
The reason I think you hate this mentality or you dislike it so much is because you were a great player. You didn't go into any game saying our best chance is someone else go be great. You went in a game saying, I know I can't do it by myself, but our best chance involves me being great.
But I also played with other players that were a lot better than the Cavs players. I played with 6 other Hall of Famers, and I think the expectations of what we expect from each other was high.
That's exactly my point. Like the Cavs are, absent of LeBron, they would be excited about how many ping pong balls they have in tonight's NBA lottery. That's what they are. If you're a team whose best player is Kevin Love, particularly post-Kyrie trade, you're a team that is one of the 7 or 8 worst teams in basketball. So I understand what Tristan's saying. And they have the evidence of this in the playoffs this year. They've played 12 games. 4 of them, LeBron's been mediocre, making less than 12 shots. Mediocre or just bad to okay, right? They're 0-4. In 8 of them, LeBron's been outstanding. They're 8-0. Like, they go as LeBron goes. Is it an unfair burden? Absolutely. Is it for me frustrating when I see other great players, the ability they have to rely on other great players And then seeing what LeBron has to do? Of course. When you see LeBron's game one was the reason they get blown out, statistically, it was almost the exact game one Steph Curry just had in a blowout win. Does it seem like, yeah, there's decks a little stacked? Sure. But that is that's the choice
LeBron made. LeBron was a free agent. LeBron went to Cleveland.
Right. Well, LeBron went to a different Cavs team than this one, but sure, I agree with you. We can't feel sorry. He has basically controlled that roster. Outside the Kyrie trade, he's controlled the roster. Well, the Kyrie trade is an enormous, but you're right. Like, he could have gone anywhere he wanted. He didn't have to sign 2 years ago a 2-year contract, which gave the power to Dan Gilbert to not bring back the GM to trade Kyrie. But to whom much is given, much is expected. Like, what does LeBron need to do tonight? He needs to go out and remind everyone that not only is he the best player in the world, but it's not even close. What does LeBron need to do tonight? He needs to combine for close to 50 points via scoring and assists. Like, that's what he has to do. That is their path to victory. Why do I think he can do it? I've seen him do it half a dozen times just this postseason. I mean, it is an unfair burden, but that's the burden he signed up for.
But you will say that the two defenses that he faced in the Pacers and the Raptors are not in the same stratosphere as what the Celtics offer.
And they didn't have home court. They did have home court against Indiana. The Raptors offered no resistance. The Raptors were beaten before that series started. Yes, the Celtics have a better defense, and the Celtics have home court. I think people can make the case that had the Pacers had home court with the way his supporting cast played, maybe that series goes differently. But I didn't go into this series expecting his supporting cast to be awesome. Now, I didn't expect them to miss their first 14 threes like they did in game one. But how are they going to win? LeBron's going to have to be spectacular.
But his supporting cast has also watched him do this. Every time he goes out and has one of these games, he pulls them by the bootstraps, and they win every single time. So, of course, they know they don't see him going out, having a bad game, them losing, then him going out and doing the same thing over again. They don't have any recent history of doing this. But I ask you, what are your expectations from LeBron tonight? You're usually pretty good at predicting what the next game is going to be.
I think LeBron will have around 37, 38 points and around 10 or 11 assists.
And if he don't, their season's over with.
So you believe if they lose tonight, the season's over?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, how bad does Cleveland have to play? We saw 82 games. Yeah, I know LeBron said they changed 5 different times. Okay. How many games do we have to see with them playing bad to think, man, this is not a good basketball team? See, that's what I've been on that. Man, they're not a good basketball team. I didn't think they were going to make it to the finals. You could only, in these intense environments, you can only play so many minutes of bad basketball. And to me, the Cavs, they're just not a good team. They don't have people that are athletic, can go off the dribble. As far as shot makers, who do they have besides LeBron James? Kevin Love, wow, is he really a number 2? And if he is your number 2, how good can your team be? They're undersized. They're under-athletic. I mean,
they don't have a deep rotation.
Not very good defensively.
In this particular series, they have a distinct disadvantage in my eyes on the coaching, on the bench. But here's the thing. This has been a point of contention with us all year, but we actually agree on it. I agree with you the Cavs are not a great team. All year long, I've never once said I think they can win the championship. But all year long, I have said this. I think this player and this player alone is good enough to get them to the finals. LeBron and LeBron alone was good enough to get them through the first round. In the second round, he was great. His teammates were good. Toronto fell apart, and they sweep that series. I have seen Boston be 2 different teams, home and road. I expect Boston to be very good tonight. I expect LeBron to be better. I expect LeBron to be good enough that they steal home court advantage back from him.
Have we, by any chance, underestimated how good this Boston Celtics team is?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't. They are a good team. They are still absent of a star. But in team sports, when you have that type of chemistry that they have, they're an elite defensive team. So anytime you can be an elite defensive team in the NBA, and we try to act as if they don't have talent. No, they do have talent. They do have a lot of players who are like, wow, this kid's starting on someone else's team. Yeah, they have a backup point guard who's also a starting point guard. So, yes, it's hard to say, wow, they don't have. Man, who they don't have. But you have to talk about who they do have.
And if you're, to C's point, if you are an elite defensive team and not an elite offensive team, we almost always underrate you to a degree. We talk about how terrible that Sixers team that Iverson took to the finals was. But they had a defensive player of the year at center. They had great defensive players. So the Celtics are the #1 defense in the NBA for a reason. That part maybe has been underrated by a lot of members of the national media.
All right, let's take a break. Hey, coming up, how much trouble are the Rockets in after getting crushed last night? That's next. First things first. All right, to the NFL now. Giants tackle Eric Flowers finally reported to the Giants facility yesterday. He had been a no-show after the Giants declined his fifth-year option. He was sort of a no-show at left tackle last year. CC, can Flowers have a bounce-back season in 2018?
Of course he can. He's still a young, emerging football player. There's a lot of players that struggle in the NFL. They're just not left tackle, so the whole world doesn't know him. They don't think they're a first-round pick. Fans didn't think he lived up to his potential, but yes, he's a good prospect. I like him back at right tackle. He's more of a natural right tackle, and he's in the last year of his contract. I believe the Giants should keep him, have him opposite of Nate Solder on the left side.
I think he can have a bounce-back year, and maybe he'd be better at right tackle. I don't think he, prior to reporting this week, had handled himself the right way this offseason. I know he was bummed out that they signed Nate Solder and they didn't pick up his fifth-year option, but they didn't do that out of nowhere. They did that because they had some of the least productive play from the left tackle position of any team in the league last season, so he earned this demotion to a degree.
To the AFC West, Broncos president John Elway said his rivals, the LA Chargers, may be the ones to beat in the division. Los Angeles won 6 out of their final 7 games last year to close out the 2017 season. CC, you agree with John Elway?
I don't know if I agree with Elway. The AFC West is stacked, though. The teams are very, very talented. You got question mark in the quarterback in Kansas City. Yes, San Diego is there. How good can their offense be? Mike Williams, the young receiver, we saw him last year, a little bit of time. Him opposite of Keenan Allen, Gordon in the backfield running the football. They have explosive players, but how good can they be? Can they be a top 10 offense? If they can, because their defense will definitely be top 10, they can be scary.
I don't think the AFC West is the best division in football, but I think it might be the most competitive. Like there's the Chargers, Raiders, Broncos with the addition of Jenna's guy, Case Keenum, and the Chiefs. None of those teams would surprise me if they won 10 or 11 games. Like, I think that's going to be a jam-packed division. I think it's very difficult to pick a clear-cut favorite in that division, more so than any division in football.
Finally, the Supreme Court struck down a law that limited sports betting to the state of Nevada. The ruling is expected to lead to legal expanded sports betting throughout the country. Nick, what was your reaction to the ruling, besides, obviously, euphoria?
Well, this doesn't... People that gamble right now, this doesn't affect them very much. And I would imagine that people that gamble right now, if I'm being totally honest, are going to continue to gamble in the ways they do, if for no other reason than your local bookie tends not to report it to the government for tax purposes. So if you go to the more established, legal establishment, you're going to have to report your winnings if there are winnings. Like, that's just the reality of it. People aren't right now reporting gambling winnings because you're not allowed to be gambling unless you're doing it in Las Vegas. What I do think, though, is for people that don't gamble or for people that have been afraid to, how do I do it? Will the online sportsbook give me my money? Is the bookie going to beat me up?
Will I get arrested?
Right. For those people, they're going to find, if and when it becomes legalized state by state, that it's easy, that it can be fun, and that can be a way to give you a little enhanced reason to pay attention to blowouts or to follow teams outside of your hometown team.
The Supreme Court justices, they did not do any justice to American citizens. Because doing 15 hours of sports a week, as much as I've been around sports, as much as I think I know about sports, how hard it is to bet. So let me tell you something. A lot of people lost a lot of money on that ruling yesterday because that gambling, I don't know a whole bunch of winners. Now, I know people who say they win at gambling, but I don't know a whole bunch of winners. And I know the National Football League is impossible to pick. So they didn't do, as U.S. citizens, they didn't do us a favor yesterday.
Well, I want to make this clear because I'm probably the resident gambler on this show. No one should look at this as a way to make extra money. No one should look at this as a way that my side job is going to be betting games. You should look at this the way that you would look at spending money on going to the movies or an amusement park or something like that, that you are paying for entertainment. Sometimes you will get a return on that investment. Sometimes you won't. Cece's absolutely right. It is almost impossible to be a long-term winner, particularly in the NFL. But if it's legal and you have the ability, if it gets really standardized to walk into a game, and as you're walking into the game, as you can do in Ireland and in England and a lot of places, bet on your team or do what the casinos love when you do, which is I'm going to put $10 down on these 6 teams to win to see if I can win $500. Like, that's fun. Like, as long as it's consenting adults and people know what they're doing, I think the Supreme Court did the right thing. It was always absurd that you could do something in Nevada and no other state was allowed to let you do it if they wanted to.
All right, speaking of betting, most people bet on the Warriors last night, so let's get back to the Rockets, who fell to Golden State 119-106 in Game 1. Rockets came out strong, and they finished weak. That is literally the worst recipe ever for a basketball game. Despite 41 points out of James Harden, 23 points out of Chris Paul, it just wasn't enough. Houston now loses the home court advantage they worked 7 months for. Chris Carter, how concerned should the Rockets be that Harden's 41 just weren't enough? I mean, how much more could he do?
I would be concerned because I didn't like the style. I didn't like him being isolated, being ball dominant. I thought when they moved the ball during the season, that's what made them special. There were times during games where they would do what they did last night. Now, Golden State, I believe that's not a way they can defeat them because the matchups they have, they're so athletic and they're so good defensively. So, yes, he had 41, but what did the rest of the players have? You know, and I believe that Golden State, they didn't allow him. He had to work for that. And I believe that it offensively, physically, it's exhausting for Harden. I believe it will play a toll. Not only it played a toll in the second half of the game where he was not as effective on offense and defense, but as we go throughout the series, if it's a 7-game series, as much as he holds the ball, it will have an effect on Harden.
Right now, the Rockets would be thrilled if it were a 7-game series because that means they win a road game. That means that they're able to fight back after a stomach punch in Game 1 because that's what it was. It was an absolute stomach punch. To CeCe's point, if you didn't watch this game closely, but you've watched the Rockets throughout the year and you hear Chris Carter talking, you're probably like, man, that's how they play. They run isolation ball. They lead the NBA in isolation ball. And that's true. But the way they played last night was that on steroids. The Rockets, throughout the year, had 22 isolation plays a game. That led the NBA. Last night, they had 45. The most of any team in any game in at least 5 years. That according to Second Spectrum. You can't beat the Warriors that way. They tried. In the first half, they held them close. But your point about the fatigue and your point about how it stagnates and allows runouts if you turn the ball over is 100% accurate. I know they're the most isolation-heavy team in the league. That's how they got to 65 wins. But they didn't get to 65. They got to 65 wins with the team averaging 22 isolation plays a game, not with James Harden himself having 23 as he did last night.
If you take a step back, do the Rockets remind you at all of the Toronto Raptors? I mean, a team that comes in as the top seed, that has more of the momentum, playing against the more popular team coming in that has like the bulk of the superstars, being at home. You know, you think it might be a close match, and then all of a sudden you see one team gets, I don't want to say blown out, but a little bit more of a tougher competition.
Well, for one, I'm not going to overreact. There's no, besides them being the number 1 seed, Toronto having the second best record, there's no way we can compare the teams. And the fight that Houston gave up. Let's not think that we watched a lopsided game. All right? At halftime, the game was tied. All right? We know, and Nick has pointed out, the most dangerous minutes in basketball is the first 3 to 5 minutes of the third quarter of Golden State. And we saw, I think they scored 63 points in the second half. But this was not a blowout. And Houston is far more talented than Toronto will ever be. So I believe this will be a good series. Golden State is the world champ. All right? Toronto got swept by the Cleveland Cavs. A team coming off an awful series where they didn't have any contribution of other players besides LeBron James outside of game number 7. So let's not lose focus of who Houston is compared to who Toronto really is.
But there are some enormous flashing red lights, warning signs for Houston. One, this is the fewest points Steph Curry's ever scored in a conference finals game, and you lose the game by 13 points. Your star, James Harden, as he had in, this is amazing, every game 1 of these playoffs, he's had at least 40 points. Harden was spectacular, and you lose by 13 points. You start the game off the way you would have hoped. The crowd was in their seats. I'll give them credit. Yeah. They were loud. They were locked in. Start the game off with a little push, 12-4. And you lose by 13 points. They did what I thought they waited till the second half to do it. But in the second half, they hunted down Steph Curry. They were putting Steph Curry into pick and rolls on every play. He had 5 fouls in the second half, and they lost by 13 points. Listen, I picked the Rockets in 7, right? and I don't believe in changing predictions after one game unless there's a devastating injury, and there wasn't. But you watched it last night, and the Warriors looked like a team that unless something happens, injury-wise, how do you beat them? Like, how do you beat them 4 out of 7? And now they got to beat them 4 out of 6. And now, in my eyes, I don't know how you guys feel. I think they have to win 2 of the next 3, right? Like, they can't fall down 3-1 to this team, right? So they have to.
Golden State is not a team you can think beyond the next game. Like, Nick Wright can do that math. Oh, they got to win 2 out of the next 3. They better try to win the first quarter in the next game. And then try to get to halftime with some type of lead and knowing that punch is coming in the third quarter. They can't even think outside of what's going to happen in the next 12 minutes in that first quarter, 12 minutes in that second quarter.
And just real quick, KD said something very interesting about that third quarter punch, which is he said we don't play better in the third quarter. It's that other teams come out and give us their best punch, and that we are able to maintain our level while they trail off a little bit. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it was an interesting window into KD's philosophy. He thinks they come out to start the game the same way they come out in the third quarter. It's that their opposition's level of play is what dips after halftime.
Let's talk about the Rockets and their defense. I think we all thought that we would see a little bit more from them. How much did that surprise you last night, CC?
It didn't surprise me based on KD. Ain't no defense for him. I mean, a 7-footer shooting jump shots, you can dribble. There ain't nothing they can do about that. KD was the difference in this game. If KD wasn't in this game or he didn't play spectacular, we wouldn't be talking about Houston's defense. Their defense played adequate enough. Clay, how many shots they forced Clay to? 15 3-pointers to be able to get those 28 points. The defense they played against Clay, there's nothing wrong with their defense, but there's no defense for Kevin Durant.
I agree with C that there's no defense for Kevin Durant, and I actually think in its totality, particularly when you saw what they did to Steph Curry, the Rockets' defense as a whole was pretty good. I know they allowed 119, and I know KD had 37. KD's shots were somewhat unguardable. But you're not going to beat the Warriors if you give them 12 free points because you just lose your guy and he busts open for a three-pointer. There was a play that was a backbreaker, I believe in the fourth quarter, where Klay Thompson caught the ball on the right wing, had time to take a dribble, set his feet, and still have a wide-open 3. Early in the game, there were a couple wide-open layups because James Harden fell asleep. You have to be locked in for 48 minutes defensively. So you can play pretty good defense against this team for 44 minutes, and those 4 minutes, a minute here, a minute there, can kill you.
Their biggest problem with Houston, how they play offense is if they go isolation and Harden goes to the hoop, they are really doing one of the cardinal sins in basketball because their point guard is up under the rim. Now, he's got 90 to 94 feet to be able to get back. Every defense that's ever been created defensively from a basketball standpoint has the point guard back immediately first. So you talk about, man, what else is hurting their defense? Fast break points. So even if they score or Harden's in the paint with a lob, they are still susceptible to the fast break on the other end. And Golden State did that to them, also beat them in fast break points, 18-3. If that continues, it's hard to play good defense when you're giving up that type of edge in fast break points.
And Rockets head coach Mike D'Antoni chalked up last night's loss to mental errors that he said bad defense, poor shooting, bad timing on the ball. So all three things that they have to work on. All right, coming up, could DeShaun Watson already be the second best quarterback in the AFC? It's next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. We're now joined by Super Bowl champ Chris Canty.
Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, bro.
Hey, Chris, what's up?
Nothing much, Jenna. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
I'm great. I'm awesome. Ready to talk some football.
Let's talk some football then.
Well
get to
done,
it.
all
Woo!
parties.
Well done all around. Good news, bad news.
How many segments are you here today, bro?
We only got
no
two
problem.
today.
I threw that
We only
one.
got two.
You guys.
Car crash coming. Coming.
Good news, bad news for the city of Houston. They lost to the Warriors last night. Not great, but their quarterback will be ready to go for training camp. Pretty great. After tearing his ACL 6 starts into the Texans season last year and after a year of rehab, head coach Bill O'Brien says DeShaun Watson will be ready for training camp. That's the case, and they do get him back full tilt. Chris Caney, what are reasonable expectations for DeShaun Watson in his return to the Texans?
Well, I think it's going to take some time for him to adjust. You know, anytime you have that ACL injury, it's usually a year before you begin to feel like yourself again. So although they say the rehab process is only 9 months to a year, it's still going to take some time for DeShaun Watson to get back to doing some of the things that he's become known for in the course of his 6 starts in the NFL. But when you look at the impact of DeShaun Watson on this franchise, I don't think it's something that you can just quantify into numbers. But if you look at what he did over the course of those 6 starts, he had 1,600 yards passing, 18 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. And, oh, by the way, he had 250 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns to add to that. He had a 3-3 record as a starter. Now, if you throw out the first start that he had on the road in a short week in Cincinnati, which they won, the offense has scored over 30 points in each of those other starts. So you look at what he's capable of doing in terms of being able to manufacture scores for that team. That gives the team an opportunity to win in every single game. And you'll take that from the quarterback position. I know what it's like to go out there with Tony Romo, Drew Bledsoe, and Eli Manning. I also know what it's like to go out there with Brooks Bollinger as your quarterback. And as a defensive player,
No offense,
you know what it is in terms of being able to have a chance to win, believing in the guy that's under center. Because Billy O'Brien made this point yesterday when he was on the NFL Network. He said, you can't quantify what the quarterback does in terms of impacting the franchise. He carries the hopes and the dreams of the franchise. If you got one that you believe in that's going to keep you in every single game, then that's just going to galvanize everybody around that team.
And when you talk about the hopes and the dreams of the franchise, this Houston Texans franchise has never had a quarterback the city believed in. Never. Not. I mean, I guess David Carr before he started playing, right? When he number as an expansion team.
They knocked the career out of him.
Right.
He got sacked 76 times.
Right. Never put an offensive line around him. There was half a year where the city, when I was down there, wanted to believe in Matt Schaub, but they didn't
Don't talk about my college teammate like that.
Listen, but
Don't
they
talk
didn't
about him
really
like that.
believe in Matt Schaub. And you talked about what DeShaun Watson's numbers were as a starter. The most jarring number is points scored by the offense. DeShaun Watson, in 6 games as a starter, the Texans averaged 35 points a game. In the other 10 games last year, they averaged 13. Like, so whatever talent he had, those other quarterbacks had. Whatever offensive line issues they were dealing with, he was dealing with. Whatever lack of explosive running back play they had, he had. Yet they were scoring 22 more points per game with him than without him. Like, there's reason the Texans to be optimistic. And if he is ready for training camp and ready for week 1, he will go into the season the best quarterback, in my eyes, this team's ever had.
Reasonable expectations are to win the division, try to get the team into the playoffs. Like Chris Canty said, I think it's important to realize he's not a positional player, but he plays quarterback. But every player it takes, not physically, not that he's not out there on the field, but it takes a year and a half mentally. Now, you playing quarterback, what's your biggest risk? All right? It's people around your legs. Quarterbacks don't get comfortable in the pocket. It takes some time. Now, is he going to wear a knee brace? Because he blew out his other knee before in college. He'll probably be wearing a knee brace. So it takes you just more time than fans want to, just because the player's out there. We know as athletes, you're still not comfortable even though you're playing the position. So for me, I don't want to put too much pressure on him. We only saw a small sample size. So let's just be careful. I put the pressure on Bill O'Brien to make sure they have a running game. All right? I'm not going to put the pressure on DeShaun. I believe he's going to be a superstar in this league. I also put the pressure on them defensively. Can you be an elite defense? They have the personnel.
Yep.
They should be able to
hurt last year.
They should be able to disrupt the quarterback. They should be able to create turnovers. So for me, I'm not going to have a conversation about DeShaun Watson with him and the responsibility of this city being on his shoulder, because it's not. This is football. It's a team game. He's got to be supported by the coach, who has got to come up with a good running game to go with this downfield passing game that they have. And you also have to realize he's not going to be as effective runner as the runner that we saw, especially not in the first 6 to 8 games of the regular season.
I get it, and that's true. And it is a short sample size. And it's hard to put expectations on a guy who played, 5.5, 6 games and then hurt himself and then spent all last season out and rehabbing. But if you could look at what you saw in that short sample size, plus you get J.J. Watt back, plus a lot of these defensive guys are coming back. They're a little bit healthier. Tell me how good this Texans team can be in the AFC.
Well, I think CC had a point. They should be able to compete for the division. Now, if you look at how the teams are built, and the main competition in that division is the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you want to win the AFC South, you got to go through Duval. But if you look at the teams defensively, it's probably an evenly matched comparison when you start looking at the Houston Texans and what they should be able to do if everybody's healthy versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. With J.J. Watt back and Whitney Merciless, those guys, and you got Tyrann Mathieu coming into that secondary, that team should be on par with the Jacksonville Jaguars in terms of total defense and being able to limit teams in yards. The difference has to be for the Houston Texans what you're going to get from the quarterback position on offense. DeShaun Watson is capable of doing a lot more offensively than Blake Bortles is. So that would be the edge for the Houston Texans if you're talking about head-to-head matchup versus a team that won the AFC South from a year ago. So that's what you have to look at. If they're going to be competitive in the AFC South, DeShaun Watson has to be the big difference maker.
Well, listen, if the Texans' defense is even close to equal to the Jags' defense,
no, I think he's talking about quarterback, offense, defense, like a ratio.
Yeah, I'm talking about the ratio. Yeah. I'm talking about the identities of the team.
Offense is going to be a lot better than Jacksonville.
Correct. So
yes.
I think the offense is going to be far better. And the Texans' names on the defense, here's the thing. Like I said, I lived there when J.J. Watt was winning 3 out of 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Since then, he's had a major back injury that resulted in back surgery and a major leg injury that resulted in leg surgery. I don't know that we can project J.J. Watt even as the all-pro he's been every healthy year of his career, but the one name you didn't mention, Jadeveon Clowney, who I think is a superstar in this league. Whitney Merciless was another one of the injured players. So they do have some of the personnel. And we haven't said anything about DeAndre Hopkins or Will Fuller. When you talk about wide receiver duos in the league, guys that complement each other. I'm not talking about the best wide receiver duo in the league, but guys whose skill sets complement each other. Hopkins, whose hands are as good as just about anybody, his ability to go get the ball, and Will Fuller, who is an absolute down-the-field threat. It's a great duo of wide receivers they've got.
Yeah, I'll be careful on the wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins is a superstar, top 5, but the other receiver, hands, very, very suspect.
Okay.
All right. DeAndre Hopkins, some of the best hands. Will Fuller, some of the most suspect hands.
Yeah, well, listen, if the Texans are going to get to the postseason, they've got to depend on DeShaun Watson to be the difference maker. That's ultimately how they're going to win that division, period.
All right. Jenna and I are going on record. May 15th, 2018, J.J. Watt, NFL Comeback Player of the Year. We believe in the workout. We believe in the person. J.J. Watt comes back.
I'm not betting against J.J. Watt. I'll say this. I worry about defensive linemen when they start to get back injuries at the end of their career, toward the end of their career. But if anybody can dispel that, it would be J.J. Watt.
And people should know, while the AFC South's been a punchline for years, last year, 2 playoff teams. This year, the 2 teams that didn't make the playoffs are getting their quarterbacks back in DeShaun Watson and Andrew Luck. That could be a very good division in what is the weaker of the 2 conferences.
All right, Chris, we're going to see you a little bit later on the show. Coming up, are the Houston Rockets in danger of being swept? We're not being dramatic or anything. That's next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. NBA champ Steven Jackson now joins the show. Hey, Steven.
How y'all doing, man? Glad to be back.
I now follow you on Instagram. I had no idea how well-rounded you are.
Oh.
Yeah, you're funny. You're funny. Oh, okay. A lot of personality.
Oh,
and nothing to do with your size. At all. To make sure
Jenna's working on not having awkward intros with our previous guest, Chris Canty.
We've never had awkward intros.
Right, well, until right now. She transitioned it right to you, Steven Jackson.
I'm sorry, Steven. It was a compliment to your... Follow this guy's Instagram account.
Thank you.
He's very... What is it? It's like underscore
stack 5 underscore.
There you go. Easy one to remember.
Rolls off the tongue. All right, let's talk about last night's game. A lot of questions coming into Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. Rockets, Warriors. How do you stop KD? How do you slow down KD? How do you play KD? How do you pronounce KD? Rockets answered none of them last night as Kevin Durant went off for 37 points to help the Warriors steal Game 1. On the road, 119-106 was your final. Despite 41 out of Harden, Rockets didn't have an answer for Durant. So, Steven, I ask you, how are the Warriors able to dominate the Rockets, at least in the second half?
Well, I said it yesterday. I said Steph and Clay was going to X out James and Chris Paul, and they did. Steph and Chris Paul didn't have a good game. Steph played better than Chris Paul, but they both didn't play well. Clay and James X'd each other out. It's not going to be an answer for KD all series. The only way is to try to take the ball out of his hands and give up some open shots. That's either way. Golden State started off the game poor. They didn't play well. James was fouling. P.J. Tucker at the three-point line. You don't foul P.J. Tucker at the three-point line. You let him shoot it. Draymond.
Yes.
You don't foul him. You let him make those shots. You don't foul him at all. The first play of the game, James got a wide-open three. They wasn't paying attention to detail at the beginning of the game. They came out a little lackadaisical, not focused. But they picked it up. You don't have an answer for KD, and it's going to be like that all series.
Listen, KD was spectacular. And KD, you mentioned it. You got to pick your poison with this Warriors team. It's why, they were the greatest regular season team ever, and then they added a guy who I think is going to finish as one of the 15 greatest players ever in Kevin Durant. So there's no great answer, but the answer has to be if Draymond or Iguodala are on the court, you double off those guys. And listen, if they're hitting shots, you lose. To quote Jeff Van Gundy, if Draymond Green's hitting shots, you lose. But what you can't have is Kevin Durant taking practice shots. And that's what it is. Unless Clint Capella's guarding him, and Clint Capella's going to have a hard time guarding him, but at least Capella has the same size as him, or he's a little shorter than KD, but he has a long enough reach he can distract his shot. The best defender on KD yesterday, oddly enough, I thought was Chris Paul.
It was.
Because at least Chris Paul got up in him. Chris Paul wouldn't let him put the ball on the ground. Obviously, KD can rise up over Chris Paul. But you're not drawing dead defensively against them, but you have to pick your spots. What you can't do is say, we're going to single cover you with a 6'5 guy. Because you single cover KD with a 6'5 guy, all you're doing is hoping he's off that night.
Right.
All you're doing is hoping tonight when KD's cold, and that can't be your recipe for victory.
Of the top 5 players in the world, over the last year and a half, we criticized KD more than any of those top 5 players. Would you guys agree?
Not for his basketball.
Not for basketball.
Yeah, what difference does it make?
Right, we have.
Sure.
We
Yeah,
have.
so true.
Yeah.
Right? Today should be his day where we should praise him, because what KD is, man, he's a basketball playing dude, man. And that's what we saw last night. We saw all the time that he spends in the gym on display. 1, 2 dribble, shoot it. Post up, turn around, shoot it. A triple threat behind the three-point line. Get inside the three-point line. Shoot it. Straight turnaround. The basic fundamentals. It's one of the best fundamental games, shooting the basketball, that you will ever see. He's a special player. We knew Golden State, their system was really good. They got a good team, but they're not that type of special without KD. And there's an answer for Steph offensively, what you do to him. There's an answer even to LeBron as far as what you can do to him. But KD, there is no answer on this Golden State team of what you can do to take KD away. He can get any shot that he wants at any time, anywhere on the court.
But this isn't the first time we're learning this about Kevin Durant. We know how good Kevin Durant is, and we also know how good Kevin Durant could be. So what was Houston's game plan coming in, and how to at least slow him down?
Well, it wasn't no game plan for KD. I guess they thought they could just man up with everybody and try to be solid. But to reiterate what you said, we always talk about LeBron being the greatest and all this, but we've never seen a KD either. We've never seen a 7-footer that can dribble, that can shoot, that's athletic. You got to remember, he's tied for second in the most scoring titles with AI. Like, this guy has been scoring since he got in the league. We talk about LeBron enough, but we don't give KD enough credit about his basketball game.
And to be fair though, KD was on the track to be talked about like LeBron, and then you guys can say it's unfair. I don't think it is. We don't know how to do the math when he's on Golden State. Like, look at the quote on the screen. Steve Kerr calls Kevin Durant the ultimate luxury. When you are the second best player in the world and your coach says, yeah, it's a luxury. A luxury by definition is something you don't
Everybody's
need.
got the same amount of money. Everyone's got draft picks.
Sure.
We had free agency.
Sure.
LeBron's moved a couple times in free agency.
Chris, I'm not denying Kevin Durant his agency.
And nothing wrong with making a great decision.
Nothing wrong with winning either.
Agreed. But when Steven says we talk about LeBron doing this and we need to give KD his due, I agree we need to give KD his due. But it's hard as a basketball analyst to compare what KD is asked to do to any of the other great players. What the Rockets need from James Harden is so different than what the Warriors need from Durant. I mentioned it earlier. Through 3 quarters, Kevin Durant had 30 points, 1 rebound, 0 assist. He was doing exactly what
he did take the challenge of guarding Harden, too.
From the jump.
And I think
the game.
he has shown this year in particular, an excellent defender. But
Last year's excellent defender, it was different. He was at the rim more.
Right. And this year he was doing that as well. The first 2 months of the year, he was leading the NBA in blocks.
Right.
It's hard to do the math on him because of the team he's on. That's the downside to his decision. The upside is they won the ring last year. He was Finals MVP. They're the favorites to win it this year. I think that's part of the reason when you say we don't give him his due is what do you do when he joins that team?
Well, you got to respect the man that wants to win. Any basketball player that comes into the NBA and that's in it not to win, what are you in the game for? I don't care if you LeBron, KD, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, anybody. You want to be in a position where you want to be the best. Now, you have guys that come in the game that really don't love the game, that's in the game for its benefits and what the game can do for them. KD loves the game of basketball.
And there's also a lot of star players would never embrace going to Golden State and playing with those other potential 3 Hall of Famers.
He could have stayed at OKC and padded his stats and won scoring title every year. It's about winning, and that's what I respect about KD. You can't be mad at him going to join a team and win because he's going to finish his career with multiple championships. You don't want to be like Charles Barkley sitting there talking about basketball all day and can't join that championship conversation.
And
sucks.
He's in an era where it was about the super teams. It was about guys teaming up, getting as many superstars as possible. That's the era that he's in. That's exactly what he should do.
But LeBron did it before him.
Hold on. People keep saying this. And you're
did
right. But LeBron went to a non-playoff team. He went to a team that
he
had won a
joined
title.
2 Hall of Famers.
No, hold on a second. Hold on. He brought Chris Bosh with him. I get it. But the team with the Hall of Famer, Dwayne Wade, had just missed the playoffs. They hadn't won 73 games, and D. Wade hadn't won 2 MVPs. He'd won 0 MVPs. LeBron, I understand that LeBron, along with the Big Three in Boston, ushered in the era of the super team. What we had never seen in NBA history was a player of his caliber joining a team that was already a championship team. And I ask you as a competitor, I understand the urge to win. But as a guy, you said yesterday, you thought you were one of the best teammates, if not the best teammate in NBA history. And that was because of the competitor that you were.
Right.
As a competitor, that's the part of this that has made people question KD. That's the part of this that made people criticize KD more for his off-the-court stuff, is we know how good this team was
Let me tell
him.
you something. If KD decides to go from OKC to Golden State, you better have a hell of a sports resume to criticize him. People out here talking about, it's about competition. Well, what do you really know about competition? Now, the people that have played the game, I can understand. They say, well, I might not have. Michael Jordan said, I might not have done these things. Barkley, I might not have. Yeah, but KD, he made himself better. He saw his weaknesses in his game. He knows his own personality. He actually pushed himself. It's a push to go to a great team and play with great players. It's harder to play with great players than it is with sorry players.
But it's harder to go to a team with great players.
It's harder.
And show up and beat the best player.
It's harder because there's more compromise, Nick.
Yeah.
So right now, hold on, let's use...
There's a lot of guys that enter their individual stats and everything, which you stated about OKC. He could have stayed there and just padded those things.
But let's use the team that I know you think has a bunch of sorry players. Who has, and the guy that you brought up, who has the harder job right now? Kevin Durant or LeBron James?
Whose check they picking up, Nick?
No, hold on, but I'm asking.
LeBron James picks up his own check. He's responsible for what's going on.
Their job is the same.
You're the one that just brought up the example. You said it's harder to play with great players than with sorry players. So I'm just asking, do you think Kevin Durant's job is harder than LeBron's?
No, but no one's comparing them today.
I don't think it's harder. I think it's both the same. They're both trying to. Their job is to win and win games. That's their job. It's nothing else. It's not.
KD does have this. If he doesn't play well, they can still win. They're a great team.
Right.
The Cavs are just in the NBA.
Right.
That's the reality.
Exactly. And Steph can have the game he had, and they can win by 13 points. Like, it is, as Steve Kerr put it, it is the ultimate luxury. It just makes your point, CC, that if you didn't compete, if you weren't a great athlete, you don't know the decision that he's going through. I concede that point. I agree. I don't know the math on that. But the flip side is, if you were the competitor, you don't have the perspective that I think I have and a lot of the viewers have, which is, as a fan, if they just run through this, I understand it's basketball at its highest level. I get it. But it takes away some of the excitement, which is the intrigue of who's going to win.
Perfect example. I was in Milwaukee. It sucked in Milwaukee. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be in San Antonio because I wanted to win, but I competed in Milwaukee like I was in San Antonio. So the way you compete is the same. But if you're on a better team, that's a luxury, and that's what you want to be. You want to win championships.
And you should do whatever you want in your career compared to listening to other fans.
I've never disputed that.
I'm Jenna Wolf, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.